Hello, and welcome to the Angry Ewok channel. Today we will be discussing double arcing and blocking and how those two work together to try to freeze enemy ships in position and allow you to get double arcs while only allowing them to get single arcs, and how you can increase your damage output with this technique. To begin our discussion of double arcing, we'd like to start from a place of discussing the three different ship types. Typically there are side arc ships, hybrid arc ships, and front arc ships, and these are some good examples from the Rebel fleet. You've got the MC-80 Home 1. It's your typical side arcing ship. Got a big side arc and kind of a narrow front arc, and the arc lines go all the way into the corners. Other ships like this are the Assault Frigate and the Providence are some notable examples of this. Then you have your hybrid arc ships, which I would consider an MC-75 to be a hybrid arc ship. It's got arc lines that do not go all the way into the corners. It's kind of reset back into the ship a little bit, but it's not nearly as deep as, say, a front arcing ship. So then we go over and look at the Liberty. Those arc lines are set far back into the ship and allowing for a very large front arc, but kind of hurts the side arcs a little bit because of how recessed they are. And these ships are not as prone to double arcing. They're much more prone to gunnery teams and single powerful arc shots. But just for our purposes and discussions today, we're going to call this a side arc ship, a hybrid arc ship, and a front arc ship. To give some examples of these arcs from different fleets, we're going to talk about the Imperials. I think that the Interdictor would be considered a hybrid arc ship because of its arc lines. It's very similar to the MC-75. The only problem is it's not nearly as fast. But its arc lines are those of a hybrid ship. And then you've got the Star Destroyer and the Vic. Both of them have a front arcing, arc layout. They're pretty much the stereotypical front arcing layout. And then you go to the clones, and the Acclimator has a very wide front arc, and it is recessed. You could make the argument that these are kind of in between. You could make the argument that the Venator is a front arcing ship. You could make the argument that the Acclimator is a hybrid ship. So they could kind of go in either place. I think the Venator's arc lines are a little bit farther forward than most front arcing dominant ships, so it kind of leans towards the hybrid. And I think that the Acclimator, while designed as a front arcing ship, I think its arc lines are very close, or more similar to a hybrid arc ship than most of its kind. So they're kind of an odd mix. And then for the Separatists, we have the Providence, which is a stereotypical side arcing ship with arc lines going directly into the corners. It's a very powerful double arcing ship. And then we're not even going to discuss the Recusant. It's a front arcing ship with a front arc that's so wide that it makes the way you fly it completely different than anything else we've encountered thus far. So I don't feel it goes in a category. We're gonna just ignore it for this discussion because the way you set up arcs with that thing is completely different, and it would not fit into any of these categories. It would kind of be something I would need to speak about on its own. Before we can discuss double arcing, we have to understand the concept of token overload. Today we're going to be discussing trying to put multiple arcs onto an enemy ship from one ship. But any type of fleet that creates a kill box and of overlapping fire zones onto an enemy target is going to do this. It's going to hit a target multiple times in a round and stress their defensive tokens and make the opponent make tough choices about, do I spend my tokens now or do I hold on to them for later? And I would submit to you that a ship that gets hit one time around is not going to be very easy to kill, because it's going to blow all of its tokens that are applicable, especially if it's got a way to move to a safe location. It's not in any danger of getting hit a second time and needing those tokens. So they're going to be very free with their damage mitigation tools that they have available. You start hitting people with multiple shots, the amount of damage that you're going to push through onto the enemy ship is going to go up significantly. I would say that instead of, if you get 5 damage out of a shot, if you hit him with a second shot, because of his unwillingness to use his defensive tech to exhaustion and depleting it, you'll probably end up pushing 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 damage through with a similar shot that follows the first shot. It's just the nature of defensive tokens that exhaust. So naturally, double arcing is a really good way to do this. You can also do this by coordinating the fire zones of your fleet onto a single target, and we've talked about that a lot, creating a kill box. But you know, we quite honestly don't see a lot of double arcing emphasis ships being played right now, but I think it's a lost art in Armada, because you know, you see a lot of these really dominant front single arc ships. You see like onagers are pretty much a one-shot deal. You look at the new Recusant, it can double arc very well. However, we are seeing a lot of Patriot Fist, you know, swivel all in on one big massive shot out of the front arc. There's a lot of that. And while those are very strong, I think their main strength comes from their ease of delivery. They're consistent and they can get the shot on target multiple rounds. But you can get a surprising amount of damage out of a double arc if you can deliver it well. And so we're going to discuss trying to set that up today, and the art of blocking. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to lock the enemy flagship in place, the enemy large in place, so that you can pound it with 2 arcs while you're only taking a single arc in return. This is a huge deal because honestly, when 2 larges square off, a lot of times the one that wins can sometimes simply be the one that goes first. But a lot of times, if you can create a blocking situation where you are double arcing them and they are single arcing you, and you can at will use a nav token, increase speed, and jump over them and escape, but they cannot, you probably are going to win that fight. And usually if it's a flagship on a flagship, if it's a big bruiser large against a big bruiser large, that's going to win you the game. So something we haven't discussed on this channel, but something I think is a very technical, very elegant part of Armada that I would like to go into more depth with. So we have a Providence that's approaching an MC-80. So in this case, the 2 ships are outside of weapons range. One of them is going to move in and begin the contest. The worst possible outcome is this. And you've seen this at a tournament, you've seen this at a game night. 2 new players are playing each other. They end up going shield dial, front shield dial to front shield dial, just bumping and grinding each other, and the only arcs that are getting used is the front arc. I've seen this before, 2 Star Destroyers nose to nose, and they cannot get out of that position because neither one of them can clear the other one. This is the Armada equivalent of 2 guys squaring off toe to toe and just slinging the nastiest punches they can find and seeing who's bigger and tougher. This is not Armada, this is a Yahtzee game. This is who rolls better. That's going to determine who wins this game. That is not elegant, that is not skillful, that is Yahtzee. We do not want this. We would rather something like this. We want to be able to produce a double arc onto the front arc of this ship. He can only fire back with 3 dice, we can fire back with 11 dice, and we're going to win that. And achieving this position is worth taking a shot or 2 from the enemy fleet to achieve. So a lot of times if you see the opening to go early in the round, even if it means you're going to take a couple hits, if it's not going to kill you and you think you can weather the storm and go early in the round next round and escape if you need to, this is often worth doing to achieve this position. And the MC-80 is trapped. The MC-80, if it tries to go left, if it tries to go right, even if it adds a click at the first one with a navigate command, it's not going to clear. Even if this were a speed 3 ship, it wouldn't be able to clear here, because we've put that big large base of our Providence in front of it such that it can't perform a speed 1 maneuver. It's important to block that if you can, because if you give them the ability to do a speed 1 maneuver and get them a little bit of wiggle room, they can usually click their nose right or left to some degree and have much more of a chance to get their arc lines on you. You would rather block them from doing a speed 1 move at all, because that keeps them from ever having that choice. So in comparison, the Providence sits here, and it can do without any kind of special commands at speed 2, it can just do a regular old single click at the end and clear over the top of over into the side arc of the MC80 when it needs to. If it needs to disengage, if it needs to escape, it can do this. This is not ideal because we still our back arc is being clipped, and so we are in danger of getting hit with the front and the side of the 80, which is not good. We would not want to leave that position. We would rather bump if we can, but you can leave doing this. And if you had a navigate command, you could add another click and then kick your nose around and clear out of the front arc. And so a lot of times getting out of these bumping situations is helped a lot by a navigate command. You typically are going to want confires or repairs. I tend for repairs because one more dice usually doesn't make the difference. But a navigate command can help disengage from a bump if you screw it up. And just remember, don't leave the position until you're ready to and have a reason to, because this same Providence can do that same speed 2 maneuver and intentionally bump by just going straight or turning into him and creating a situation where that ship's going to overlap, and that resets him back to that front arcing position, and he will not leave that position until he has no choice or the enemy ship is dead. We use the Providence as our example. We'll also talk about some of the other arc types. The hybrid has a little more, can get that arc and have its nose turned away from the enemy ship a lot more because of where the arc line sits, and that's useful if you're trying to do the two things that this MC75 is trying to do to this to this Star Destroyer. So it's got an arc to the front. It can do either of these green maneuvers is an option that'll get you out of the front and into the side should you choose. Because you want to try to set down inside the enemy pore arc if you can. There's no reason to take more hits than you need to. Again, we're looking at the different arc styles, and the front arcing ship, I know it's kind of a rainbow over there, but this Star Destroyer, because of how far back the arc line is set on the ship, it's going to have a little bit of a harder time shooting that shot and then clearing. More often than not, these Star Destroyer types, they end up delivering a double arc but have a hard time not flying into a double arc unless they're very, very close to their target. So that's why they're not quite as forgiving as an arcer, but you can still kind of do it. But what you're the ideal position is what you see here, where the Star Destroyer is blocking the Venator, but then could easily do like a navigate speed 1 double click and set down on the far side of the Venator. But because you have to approach at such an oblique angle with a front arcing ship to double arc, there's a little more chance of this happening. A little more chance of you moving and that Venator getting away, or you overflying your target. Star Destroyers have been double arcing and killing things for years. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying that they're a little more difficult to do it with, and you need to be cognizant of that. So one reason that double arcing and black dice ships in general are kind of not seeing as much play is because of the pass token. Used to, in 1.0, you could last first people if you had the activations, if you had first player. That's not really a thing anymore because of the pass token, unless you just massively out-activate the enemy fleet. They almost have to take like 2 to 3 ships, and you have to have 5 against 2 you can do it, 7 against 3 you can do it. But the point is, if it's a normal fleet fighting another normal fleet, they'll be able to spend their pass tokens, and the second player will get the last activation. So he'll always get a chance to move, but as the first player, you can close before he moves. And I think setting up these arcing positions is important to be done early in the round, leading up to your big turn that you want to deliver this shot. And so we're looking at this Providence, and this Providence is trying to close. He would like to try to close in and be in such a position that he could set up a double arc next turn that the 80 cannot escape from. And a lot of times, you know, you want to put the arc line, you know, directly down the middle. Like you see this Providence, he's positioning himself, and it's a beautiful arc. That arc line is basically splitting that front shield dial. There's not a lot of ways that this 80 is going to skip out of this. If it goes hard to the right, he gets caught. If it goes hard to the left, he gets caught. So you're getting what you want. You're getting your double arc in position, but you're giving him enough space that he can potentially get his arcs on you as well. So that creates a situation where you moved in earlier than him, he got to shoot you at a shorter range than you got to shoot him, and now he can adjust and try to create an escape route for himself, and he's getting to use both of his arcs. So you kind of wasted your advantage there. And the way we stop this is by crowding him. If this Providence had come in closer, he could have prevented that speed 1 move and prevented the 80 from being able to change its position at all. This is a perfectly executed block. We've got the double arc in position, and the 80 won't be able to wiggle out of this. Now, yes, you're approaching to black range, so he's going to get to use every dice he's got. You're going to be taking a much more damaging shot on the way in, but you have to weigh that risk, and if you think it's going to be worth the reward, you pull the trigger and you establish this position. And this position will probably end up winning this guy the game, because he's going to get to salvo back. He can do, you know, spend all his tokens he wants to, all the tokens he has available to him against that single arc shot. You know, this is in a vacuum, obviously. But, you know, if he had let that 80 have the space to turn its head right or left and throw its arcs onto him, he doesn't really have an advantage there. This is using the position and using the block to ensure that this double arcing situation is not going to change, and that takes nerve to pull the trigger and close early, but the reward is having a dominant position that you can exploit until that ship falls down. Wanted to briefly discuss trying to double arc people with small base ships. Small base ships are not big enough to really block effectively. You can, but it's hard, and specifically with like black dice ships, you know, you used to be able to last first and kind of protect yourself from getting shot, because there wasn't salvo in the game, and you could delay until your target is moved, and you can move in with perfect information, set down that arc, and smoke them. Now, thankfully, that is not the world we live in anymore, because that was too easy to do. It required much less skill, much less finesse. Somebody could just hang back, and then line up an arc, shoot you, and be gone. And anybody can do that, you know, and do a lot of damage. Versus now, with the pass tokens the way they are, you're probably going to have to close in on your target, knowing that your target will move after you get there. So what that means is you're going to get shot, probably from close range, because you're going to be setting yourself up to where you can shoot them at close range, probably next turn. And so you don't want to do that in the front arc. This MC30 wants no part of the front arc of that Venator. He would much rather come in the side arc. So a lot of these black dice flankers especially, they want to be here. They want to be flirting with that arc line as close as they can possibly do it. And I like to be 90 degrees off, or maybe even tilted, pointing back in the same direction of travel as the ship that you're chasing. You may not be able to get that because that's a pretty steep angle. But what you're doing here is you're establishing a position where if this Venator moves forward as it tries, it's going to shoot you. Its left side will shoot you at black range in the face. Hopefully you have defensive tech that can take that shot. And I would strongly advise redirecting everything you can away from those facings. I probably would shoot with the side first. I would probably try to get it to the back if you can help it, because you're going to be attacking this guy next round and he's going to be salvoing you. And so you got to be understanding that you're going to eat 2 different 3 dice salvos coming back at you when you shoot. That's another reason why this is not as good as it used to be. But like I say, the Venator moves at 1 and 2 and 3. They're caught, as you can see. it might try to turn in, and it'll get caught at 1, it'll get caught at 2 with the double arc. At speed 3, it can clear with an extra click. Potentially, if this MC30 had been able to turn more back to the left or up, I guess, on your screen, so that its arcs are pointed in the direction of travel of the Venator, it's much more likely that it would have caught it. But that's where you kind of need to be looking. You need to be trying to get 90 degrees out to them, coming in at a perpendicular or pointed back in their direction of travel, and have your nose as close to them as possible, because that keeps your arcs, it makes it much easier for your arcs to catch them. Just know that this is it's a hard life for these small boats right now, because of point defense ion cannons, because of all the black dice nerfs that we've seen. They're not useless, and they take a lot of skill to use, and that you earn every shot that you take, which didn't used to be the case. I'm so thankful for the pass token, because last first was horrendous. It shattered the reality of the game and made one person's job of lining up arcs way easier than the other guy's job of lining up arcs, and it wasn't really, I don't think it was very fair, because the skill difference required to use them. But now, if you're going to use this, you have got to be very sharp, and you've got to be a very good pilot to use it, and you are justly rewarded with effective dice. Just be cognizant that you're going to have salvo coming back at you most of the time, and that's another reason why these small base ships are having a hard time. It's because if they're delivering that double arc, they're probably eating 2 salvos at short range, so their evades are not going to be useful. That makes it really difficult. If it were me, I suggest heavy turbo lasers, because heavy turbo lasers, although not common and not overly used, they say that if you're going to brace this shot, you can only reduce the incoming damage by 1 unless this is the only defensive token you spend. And so if this MC30 can hit you with X-Racks and hit you for, say, 4 and 5 out of its arcs, you can only brace that to, and reduce it by 1, or you can not salvo and not redirect. So I think it's kind of like a poor man's Mon Caron, and I think it's one of the ways that specifically MC30s can remain viable under this current circumstances. That being said, it's still tough. Thank you for watching. I hope this was informative. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you'll come back. Double arcing is hard. It's not a skill that you just develop overnight. It's not easy, and even when you think you've mastered it, you'll try to apply it and then you'll miss. I miss all the time, and it makes me so mad. And I feel like, man, I need to go back and practice. I would suggest that if you're a veteran player and you're watching this video and you're just trying to get some pointers and trying to brush up, when you go to your game store and you're playing newer players, try to take a list that's a little bit powered down and try to make yourself win with double arcs. Make it so that you don't really have this overawing firepower coming out of 1 or 2 arcs. Make yourself have to fly really well to earn a victory against a newer player, because that's going to sharpen your skills. It's going to put pressure on you to improve, and give them a little better of a chance, maybe. And that's the thing that's beautiful about Armada. The fact that the position of these ships matters so much is kind of unique. It's not, because X-Wing is similar in a lot of ways, but you get more firepower out of a ship based on its position than its upgrade stack. And that is beautiful. That is not common in wargaming. Most games, if somebody net lists a unit, puts it on the table, it's going to output X amount of damage, because they can point it in any direction they want to, shoot however far it can shoot, and it'll do its thing. You just wind it up and watch it go. That is not the case in Armada. It is not a game that lends itself to that. It's a game about positioning, and double arcing and blocking is the pinnacle of that positioning. You can take the same large base ship, load it out the same way, and a person who's never played it before or been playing 6 months can take that ship and think it's terrible. A person who's been playing that ship for 2 years knows what he's doing with it, and can see the game, can see the pieces in motion, even though it's, alternate activation. He can see these two fleets swirling together and closing and fire, and can put it where it needs to be. That guy's going to get more damage out of it. That is not common in war games, and that is why Armada is the greatest war game that has ever been produced, and that's why it's such a beautiful and demanding game, and that's why it's worth practicing. That's why it's worth trying to perfect these skills and be very, very good and very, very intentional about your positions, because it will reward you.